Yeah, what kind of projects are you doing right now? Because I know that you're doing a lot right now in various ways that's to do with smell, but also with other things. So, what are some of the olfactory projects you're working on right now?
So I started to work quite a bit with olfactory research, basically working in interdisciplinary teams. And a couple of the projects I worked on starting around 2015, 2016 were with psychologists from Stockholm University working in the area of olfaction and the senses. And we were initially going to work on in the area of smell training, like what can we hope to do? What are some of the applications for smell training, where we have people kind of repeatedly smell things, practice the sense of smell, kind of like you're strengthening a muscle, basically. And we had some interesting hypotheses. We were looking at potential cognitive benefits of that. Intended to look at some of the ways in which smell training could help children to accommodate new flavors and new foods and things like that. We looked really interested also in things like developing like competence, connoisseurship, people who need specialist, skills such as perfumers and sommeliers. Those were interesting targets to think about. And so we started working at developing like some research platforms for dealing with that. When you work with smell and research, there aren't a lot of existing devices that you can use as research instruments for the kind of work we were looking at. So we had to spend some time doing hardware development, and we developed a device for working with virtual reality. We developed a kind of a really simple game for helping people improve their sense of smell and practice smell training at home using a laptop and really simple, low cost kind of components. What, of course, what happened was the pandemic, right? And so, initially we were thinking we were just going to deal with this very kind of relatively niche and fairly high level question. And of course, then we had a situation where tens of millions of people lost the ability to smell, hopefully temporarily. But the notion of smell training immediately was overtaken by that. And so the consequences of what we were doing really changed radically because of the pandemic. So that's one of the things we were looking at was like smell training, and that's something we still look at. I have partners in Japan that are looking at the potential cognitive benefits for older adults, and that's a really interesting area as well. The rationale for that is that the smell is the first sense that one loses with the onset of dementia, and so there's a really interesting relationship between smell and cognitive decline. And so one of our hypotheses were if people practice smelling things and try to get better at it, does that have a way of ameliorating potential cognitive decline? It's kind of an interesting hypothesis we're still looking at. But our partners in Japan, with an aging population, are really interested in the idea of like, can older adults practice this and could it be good for them in a particular way? Or maybe there's just another benefit of sociability and the pleasure of nostalgic memory and things like that. So I'm
And
working with smell training still. Yep.
you're developing digital methods for this, right? So you're using digital
Correct.
media to create methods for olfactory training, right?
That's correct.
How do you approach the challenge of, say, the aging population being less familiar with digital media? Have
That's a
you
good,
come across
yeah.
this?
Very good question. So partly we're interested in the Japanese context. There's some really interesting things. One is that there are centers for older adults, which are really based on e-gaming or e-sport. So there are places where older adults gather specifically for gaming, and it's kind of intriguing. So there are contexts where that can be supported. You're right, because normally it's like the other thing is it really challenges us to make everything really intuitive and simple. They're really these systems are just like very simple systems that one can work with that don't require a lot of digital skills. But it is a really good question, like how do you engage older adults? And our colleagues in Japan who are based in Kyoto have done a lot of work on identifying, well, what do older adults remember with pleasure. It's nostalgic. And so it's kind of intriguing because, of course, it's different from Japan, from California, or from Sweden. There's a different set of smells. It could be tatami mats, it could be sakura, cherry blossoms. So it's partly identifying, like, what do people want to smell? How can we engage that with them? I mean, you just do that with physical sense. You don't have to have a digital component, but the digital part does allow for a little more understanding and recording of what their experience is like. Did they get things right? And so you have ways of making that available to other people, caregivers, people who can interpret those results or might need to know those results. So that's another reason for doing it with a digital system rather than just an analog system, which you could also do, like sniff and sticks, right? So sniff and sticks are just, basically physical sticks that you work with, but there are reasons to want to do that as part of a digital system. So the other things we're doing, besides that, working with in the area of smell training, looking at older adults, I'm doing the work we'll talk about a little bit, the media archaeology work with Jazz Brooks at the University of Chicago. And also, I'm trying to get going a pilot project working with kind of scent material interventions, which is very different. It's not really game related, but we're interested in working with some partners in India on the topic of sandalwood and finding ways in which we can think about supporting the vitality of what's a really endangered scent resource.
So very broad range of smell research.
Yeah.
That's great.
And it's not all game related, and it's not all necessarily interactive in the same way.
No,
Definitely.
but I guess that keeps you on your toes.
It does indeed. It does indeed.